Okay, back with you on the Bronx Buzz. Thanks to David Brand for that incredible reporting, and we need a heck of a lot more of it. And anytime he does it, we'll bring him back on the Bronx Buzz. Right now, I want to turn to a friend of mine. He's actually a neighbor of mine, lives in my neighborhood. My buddy Alex Simmions, who, by all rights, is a brilliant comic book writer, but a comic book fan and a comic book promoter, all of the above. And he's
All that good stuff, right?
all that good stuff, but really made an industry out of giving young people a chance to see themselves in a format that they can appreciate and they can get from. And recently emceed a panel discussion about a book called Run Book One, which oh, he's got the book right there,
Yes.
which is based on the life of the late Congressman John Lewis.
Mm.
And so there's the book. Why don't you give us the whole background? You were telling me about it beforehand, that this is actually a sequel by John Lewis, and then we'll bring up why you were chosen to be
Well,
the moderator of the panel.
the short story, because it's a very huge one, but the short version of this story is that Congressman John Lewis was right there in ground zero, if you want to call it that, during the civil rights movement in the '60s, right there with Martin Luther King and the various organizations that developed to move forward to fight for Black civil rights, in particular in the South. And he had a remarkable life, in terms of highs and lows. Remarkable life, was very much a part of the movement. And just a few years ago, was convinced by one of the young men who is an aide for him as a congressman, Aiden Andrews, said, Congressman, you've got to write this. You've got to write about your life. You've got to write about what happened. Not just because it's about the civil rights movement, but it's about life. It's about how people, even people with theoretically common ground, can clash as well as come together. And to show, this is a human condition. It's a human story.
And
So
I
yeah,
have to interject, what a contemporary story with two factions of Democrats who can't get together.
you know,
And certainly
that's a whole nother smoke and
but
spray.
but that is part of what you're talking about,
Yeah.
that we're on the same page. We are working toward the same thing, but we can't come to
Yeah,
agreement.
what? Because I've got mine, you got yours, and I don't see any way for them to
Right.
blend or mix
Wow.
or meet.
Fascinating.
So the congressman did, and that was March, the graphic novel March, which was in 3 parts, and of course was an award winner, and moved and kicked open a number of doors, and became, a great way to introduce young people to the civil rights movement, because it's this type of thing of where we have a major event in social history, and then all you need is a few TV commercials and a couple of movies, and boom, we forgot about it again.
That's right. That's right.
So,
Oh, I
so
saw that on TV. Yeah, that was yesterday.
yeah, right. That was like 20 minutes ago, right? So it was a thing of bringing that back, and again, from that level of these were the players involved, and this is what it looked like, and these are the conflicts that were going, not just black and white, but black to black, white to white, and so forth. And after finishing that, which only took you to a certain point in the civil rights movement, that's when, again, as I understand it from the panel, Aiden Andrews rather, said to the congressman, the rest of the story is just as poignant, just as important. And so they talked, and eventually they wrote Run, but it's in two books. So the first book is
Is
out.
the one that's out now.
That's the
Okay.
one that's out now. Whether or not the second one, or how it's going to come out, that's still in question right now, as I understand it. I'm not an authority on it. This is what I got from the panel.
Sure.
It's still sort of
Let's talk
in
about the
development.
nature of the book. And Rebecca has some great photos of the pages. This is, on some basic level, a comic book. I mean,
Well, yeah, well,
you called it
a graphic
a
novel. Yeah,
graphic novel,
yeah.
but this is how young people can really
It's
absorb
sequential art.
information.
It's a comic book. It's a graphic novel. It's a story with visual aid. It's whatever way you want to look at it, in terms of a story about people. It's not superheroes now. It's people living in ordinary people living in an extraordinary times, and living an extraordinary life, in often at times a very dangerous and traumatic life. And this is what happened really in terms of how the movement began to shift and sort of fracture. And it became, well, yeah, we're all about wanting equal rights for Black people, but I want it this way, you want it that way, and we're seeing it a third way. And it just began to splinter. And what that did in terms of the congressman's point of view, what that did, how that affected him, how that affected the movement, how that affected people who were not Black, but wanted to be a part of the movement to support it, and yet were being either ostracized or trying to find their own way, or walking away and going, okay, forget it.
You know,
So
there's
it's very
something that
important.
you said in there that I'm gonna differ with. You said who are not superheroes, but maybe there are some real life superheroes, a lot different than the beautiful, wonderful, dramatic characters you've created, but a different way of looking at superheroes.
Well, I'm
Is that fair? That's fair.
well, as a wordsmith, which is what I am. I tend to play this game. I think that people are capable of being heroes. I think the word hero carries weight in and of itself. Superheroes, yeah, that's a compliment
All
to
right,
the average person, but it basically refers to people with powers and capes. And
I
so
get it.
I tend to think of, people who do heroic things or who are heroes. They don't need to be super. They just went in the direction of the danger rather than running from it.
Well, using the word "run," I'm sorry, Alex, that's me. You know me a long time. That's
Yeah,
the
come
way
on,
it's gotta
so
be.
many years that
Uh,
we can't even count them
so
anymore.
so, yeah, we're really not gonna do that.
Yeah.
What is interesting, to me is, basically it's first you walk, then you run,
Mm.
and, this is a way of communicating with young people. Talk to me a little bit, outside of this book, but in general, what you have found, and you have traveled the world literally using comic books to communicate ideas. Why is this effective for young people?
Well,
And
I'm gonna
and
I'm
have
gonna try and answer your question
Go
and
ahead.
also tap the book experience, or at least the panel experience one. For one, young people in my travels, and that literally is traveling the world. Young people are young people. Period. We all come into this world with the same basic material, and then try and figure out who we are and where we fit in. And I've run into young people in the United States, Black, white, Asian, whatever, Europe, Africa, and
The
they have
Soviet
the same
Union?
basic, yeah. So they have the same basic aspirations to try and figure out, how do I fit in, how do I make my place. And some of them have such tremendous stories, whether they're happy stories or traumatic stories. They have such tremendous stories and things they're trying to work out. And graphic novels or comic books are ways for them not only to read about others who might be going through a similar thing or like them, or read about stories that take them away from the thing that's weighing down on them. But
Mhm.
also, because of a lot of the artists I work with, the things that I'm doing as well, and people in other places, other countries are doing, it's a wonderful methodology, therapeutic methodology for young people to express their stories and express and tell the kind of stories and things that they're encountering and they're dealing with and they're trying to figure out. So that's been very impressive to me and very impactful to me. And I think
And why a story like this needs to be told in that way.
right.
I'm sure I've related this to you a number of times, that when I was younger and had a pile of comic books, my parents, who were very traditional educators, were concerned that we were not getting reading.
We're
But
reading real books, right?
real books, but
Yeah,
they were counseled to back off because it helps the child illustrate and picture in their mind what they're reading. And if maybe they're not that strong, reading words, but when the words are put with the pictures,
that's right.
it
Right.
works.
But one other thing too, in the panel, and again, I interviewed Aiden Andrew, Nate Powell, who's one of the illustrators, and Elle Fury, who's the other illustrator of the book Run. And I asked them a question about what was it like, because they're all of them are white. All of them all three of them are Caucasian and were raised in the South. And I said, what was it like working on this story and even on March, which is a story about, in effect, the Black movement and predominantly, it's a Black man's story about what he did during that time. What was it like for you doing this? And they all said, uh, literally, they each told a story about the awakening that they had to some aspect of their upbringing and their own view and their parents' view of life around them by reading, and I'm sorry, by working on this book, by developing this book, by creating the art, and of course then having the book in their hands, looking at it and reading it and recognizing, oh my goodness, I didn't realize that they thought this way, or so and so saw it this way, or that we were privileged in such and such a way. So once again, the books, the graphic novels, not only tell a tale that someone can consume, but they also enlighten the creators.
They bring it to life. In some
Yeah.
ways, I relate it to the women's movement, that we're not going to have a fully liberated women's movement until the men fully understand it. And it would be like men writing a book about, a women's movement, et cetera, and getting an education along with
Yeah.
it. It's really it's a fantastic concept. I'm wondering now. John Lewis viewed it like this. I mean, this is what his vision was. That
This
they
was
were going.
his point of view,
Wow.
and he worked very hard to be, I feel, very honest about in telling this tale. Yes, it's from his experiential point of view, but he also was respectful of those who were counter to where his head was or his view was. He tried to present it in a way that was an honest, authentic telling of the tale, a respectful telling of the tale.
Alex, we are just about out of time. Take about 30 seconds. What are you working on? Some for yourself? You're
For
drawing.
myself,
You're
I'm
writing.
working on my own project, which is another graphic novel called Blackjack, which is about a black soldier of fortune in the 1930s, because history does matter.
And you will make sure to let us know when it comes out, and you will be here again. And maybe I'll run into you in the grocery store.
Of course
You
you
never
will.
know. So listen, happy holidays, my longtime friend, and best to your family and
The
the
same
kids
to
and
you.
everything else. And that's it for the Bronx Buzz for this evening. Thanks again to David Brand, to Alex Simmions, to John Lewis for inspiring all of us. And what a good way to think about our holiday season: peaceful, with equality, and everybody being family, one family. All right. So happy holidays to everybody. Good night.